have Dorian presenting his HTML and JavaScript interaction within Godot. So the stage is yours.
Okay, awesome. All right, so like I showed off in the sort of the previous show and tell, sort of I was able to figure out how to integrate Godot with its HTML and JavaScript page where it's living on, and I thought that it would be really neat to actually bundle this into sort of a demo and a bit of presentation code that people can actually, um, you know, download and actually learn from and maybe use it for their own projects. So to start off, I set up a repo on this particular site. I'm hosting my own code base, and essentially it's a small, just relatively simple demo that basically using Godot 3.2 and the HTML5 export, I've set up an actual little mini game that integrates uh, with 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 its host HTML and JavaScript page, and I put in a couple notes in terms of how it was set up, and I will also sort of briefly go over some of the changes that I needed to make to actually get it to work.
Cool.
So I'll start off with the demo. So if you go to the page, you'll actually start off with a little text box and a button to enter in your name. This is actually a small little mini quick game. So a nice little quick game. Let's start the game now. All right. Let me actually just refresh. There we go. We'll start the game. And
It's Murphy.
yes, it's Murphy's Law, but that's okay. Never fear. I'll just run it. Let me just change my screen. Thought I had it working, but let me just change my screen and I'll just show the Godot engine in place. So let me change my window. There we go.
You might have to change your Discord shares. Okay, now we are able to.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a very basic game. There's really nothing to it. It basically lets you click to increase your score and then finish out when you're done with it. So if you're just to play the project as a regular one, right, I have to switch between screens constantly, don't I?
Did you set up your Discord shares setting as application or the monitor itself? If you do the
I'm going to
monitor,
actually go with the monitor because that's going to be easier.
yeah, then it'll capture no matter what.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Okay, this is all new, so we are getting used.
Okay, all right. So it's a very simple game. You click and you just get more, you get a larger screen as you click on, and then you could say that you're done and exit the game. So that's sort of that's just the basic game itself. Not particularly exciting, but when we put it into an HTML shell, HTML file cell, we can actually start doing things like taking input from a user. So here, and please tell me you're going to work and not break.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Nice. Oh, okay. This is really unfortunate. MS file scripted. Oh, man. Huh. This kind of sucks. Actually, guys, I'm going to do something where I'm going to actually just try to switch my computer and I'll join you guys briefly in a couple minutes.
Sure.
As I mentioned before, the previous demo didn't quite work out. I started working on basically converting a little. I wanted to create a little demo of how to integrate Godot with HTML and its HTML shell with the JavaScript associated with it.
We are having audio issues.
Okay.
Was that WBW?
It's Will.
Will. Okay.
It's okay. So I will share the link to the actual site itself because I've open sourced this code so that anybody can actually work with it and play around and use it sort of as a base for their own sort of demo. I've included notes in terms of the documentation that's in Godot and also some of the small minor little tweaks I had to do along the way. But let's start off with a quick demo. And I'm going to actually do it inside the Godot engine. So I created a very simple clicker game where essentially you click a button and you increase your score. So if we just play it without an HTML, without just as regularly, without invoking it as an HTML shell, it's just a very simple thing where it displays the name of the player here, and you could increase your score. The real fun part is when you actually start integrating it with the HTML side of things. So I'm going to hit I'm done, and that's going to exit out of the demo. And I'm going to now run it in a browser using the HTML5 shell. So here we have basically the way I've designed this is that I've actually hidden the canvas for the game itself, just so that you can take input from the player before you begin. So I'm going to just add in my name, and we will start the game. Here we go. And as you can see, you can click the button, and basically your score increases. And this time, when I finish, I'm done. Rather than exiting out of the window, I'm going to it's going to show me my score. There we go. It took in my my player name, and it also took the score out of the Godot game and brought it into the page where it's hosted.
Okay, so this part we are seeing is actually HTML.
Exactly. Yeah. As for on the Godot side of things, like I said, it's a very simple setup with just a few labels and buttons. In terms of the actual script itself, I have some code to actually basically get the player name, which unfortunately as part of the demo kind of broke. But we can get the player name, update it. The way we get the player name is we first of all we start off with an initialized variable so that we can have some kind of default value if we fail. And then we check if we're running in a web environment. So this way you can actually check whether you're running inside the HTML5 shell and have different code versus if you're running in a desktop or a native client.
Sorry, Dorian, to do more justice to your hard work, your screen still looks like sort of split between two monitors.
Oh, my goodness, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So
let me see if I can change the windows just to have single screen. I was hoping that it would just be a single screen. Is that a single screen now, or is it?
Yes, it has
I'm still seeing two screens. I've got Godot on the top screen and then Discord on the bottom screen.
Oh, okay. Well, then let me just go into Godot itself.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's better. Is there a way you could increase the font size so it's more legible?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
There we go.
No. Cool.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, here we have a little check to see if we're running inside a web environment. And the way that you would check it is that you would use the OS module and you'd see if you have the feature of JavaScript. If that's the case, then essentially you can you can evaluate various types of JavaScript within Godot and get an answer from basically your evaluation. So here we basically just evaluate a JavaScript function called getPlayerName, which lives on the shell, and I will show how the shell is actually set up. But we are able to actually run this code and be able to bring in the value into Godot and basically make decisions on it. Likewise, we can do the inverse. So for instance, we have this when we put the quit button has been pressed, we call a function called exit game. And very much the same way, the exit game will take in the score that we have been keeping track of, right? Every time we click the button, we increase the score. And again, we can basically, like last time, evaluate some JavaScript, and then that JavaScript will get passed into the custom HTML shell. Before I go off and show sort of the code for the shell itself, in terms of exporting the project, obviously you need to run it as a runnable HTML file. I don't know if you can see the export
Yep.
window right now.
Yep.
Okay. Wasn't sure whether or not it would just default onto the main window there.
Yeah.
But as you can see here, I have the path where I'm exporting to. I have defined a custom HTML shell where it resides. And pretty much that's it. You can put in other features if you want to, but I decided to go with sort of a very basic setup. You can also include stuff that you would put into the head of an HTML page here. But again, I decided to, for simplicity's sake, to basically have everything living on one HTML file rather than trying to deal with the paths. In terms of the files themselves, let me just bring up Visual Studio Code and I'll show you the HTML behind it.
You may have to update your Discord
Yep.
interface.
Yeah, I am going to do that. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see my screen, or should I increase the font?
I think one size bigger would be better.
Okay, I'm trying to see how to get that up. Oh.
I think that did it. Yeah. Control
Okay.
zoom.
Awesome. Right. So basically, if you look up the documentation for Godot, they will actually give you they'll provide you a little bit of a pre-existing HTML shell with sort of placeholders for where Godot will interact with the HTML itself. So, for instance, this is one of the attributes. So basically, the project name from Godot will get populated in here. Once the the packed WebAssembly executable runs, it will replace the values of this HTML file where there are these attributes. And there are some defaults that Godot provides in terms of the styling side of things. Nothing particularly interesting here. And you end up getting basically these two diffs. One is for the canvas, and one is for the debug output panel. If you decide to run in debug mode, all of your debug error messages will end up here. For the sake of clarity, I've actually just wrapped this around with a diff itself, just something that I can essentially style a little bit more easily. Then Godot will bring in the base JavaScript file that it generates. And there's a bit of JavaScript that it needs to actually start the build up the executable, as you can see here. Again, this is all provided in the base shell. And for the most part, you can use the base shell, but I did find that I had to do a couple of tweaks to get everything working the way I'd want it to. Now, lower down here, here's the actual JavaScript that I set up to interact with the Godot game. So I have a few functions here, one for setting the player name, another one for getting the player name. I have one for showing the game. So this is the interaction where you go from where you enter in your name and it displays the game screen itself. And as you can see, right? So for instance, this get player name, this is the same function that Godot later calls in its script. So this get player name and this get player name function are basically the same function. And essentially, Godot enables you to take advantage of anything that's running within the context of this HTML document. And then just basically using plain old JavaScript, or if you're using something like React or whatnot, you can include your React project in here and just basically interact with whatever exposed functions that the page can see, well, then Godot can see those same functions.
Yeah, like say that name was stored in local storage, but that could be coming from a database.
Exactly. Yeah. Originally, I actually did something even more old school and just attached it to the window, but yeah, local storage is a better call. But yeah, you can call out to basically everything that you get in a browser. You can interact with it with Godot, so long as you give it a nice little handle to call against. I mean, Godot will run arbitrary JavaScript code in this particular context based on whatever is running in that window. But obviously, it's a little easier if you predefine it as a function that is easily callable rather than just, you don't want to end up writing streams and streams of JavaScript as a string in Godot, because that will drive you crazy.
Yeah, you mean there has to be some kind of naming convention, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind.
Yeah. Obviously, this is a very simple project, but
Yeah.
Once you get into a more complicated setup where say you may have multiple people on the same team working on the system, then obviously you have to organize things in such a way that everything works together. And you may want to decide that, for instance, whatever scene is managing the interaction with the browser itself, that it's set aside separate from the other parts of your game.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's basically it. The one thing that I found that was an issue is that the original shell actually had a line called extra args, which I believe are just arguments that you can pass in from Godot. Unfortunately, because this wasn't getting passed in the export, it was actually failing, and was failing even to start the game engine. So you may have to remove that line and update the line that actually starts the game, so that instead of saying executable name, main, pack, and extra arcs, you drop the extra arcs.
Yeah. So that's when there's no extra arcs, maybe don't call it.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It may work with a newer version Godot. I don't know. Maybe I was in the master branch from the basically from where you get that shell from Godot, from the Godot project. It may be that they're using Godot 4 or something like that, and maybe those extra arguments come over that way. But this is the thing that I found that worked for me.
Cool. This looks like it actually might bring a lot of new possibilities for people who have been developing HTML games. But now with the ease of Godot, now we can still do some HTML stuff. It combines,
yes, especially with Flash.
Yep. Dying.
Becoming obsolete. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been dying for the last decade, man.
Yep. Anyways, I'll share the link to my project. I think I may have broken the actual demo page itself. But another thing I wanted to show. Hold on, one extra thing, sort of like bonus content, I guess. You guys still see my the Visual Studio Code?
No.
No, I'm not seeing anything from your screen now.
It looked like the stream was.
Let me try it again. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Go live. Okay, there it is.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing. I get Godot. That's another IDE.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked about the web export, it's actually once you start thinking in terms of just integrating with the web, you can actually start hooking up stuff like a CI tool to actually build out and export your game. Every time you do a push, you can export a new version of the game. And I think just if you had a little talk about how to actually use the Dockerize build to do that. But yeah, this is essentially what. Sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, I was saying I do have like a video out there on that.
Yeah. So you can actually easily wire up like what I have here with my CI, where I essentially just use sort of the Godot CI Docker image to just run a command to export the HTML5, basically build out the HTML file export that Godot provides, and then essentially just upload it to a site that's basically running S3, which means that you can very easily iterate and quickly iterate with a project and show off how things work by using just hosting a simple website somewhere.
Yep,
Yeah, and that's
great potential.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, that's basically it for me.
Looks cool. Really, a lot of potential. Yeah, as Jeff was saying, like when Flash is finally gone, this might be a good tool to replace the old stuff. Really.
Yeah, definitely. What was the project that you're working on that kind of triggered this talk?
Yeah, so essentially at work we have these hackathon events where like every half year, like halfway through the year, we have a hackathon event, and we can essentially work on any sort of project remotely related to work or something that we found interesting. And I thought that it would be really interesting to wire up a web game as sort of an interactive ad for us to basically come up with sort of an interactive promotion for our members. So what you would do is you'd go to a web game, and depending on your score, you would get that percentage or that bonus that you could add on to your purchase of points. And the idea was how easily would it be to actually integrate Godot into this whole infrastructure where normally we have a setup where we would send a member a link for a promotion, and then that link would take them to to a website. So I thought, why don't we make the promotions a little bit more exciting by making them more interactive, right? So very much in the spirit of the old web and flash games, like whatever your final score is, that gets tacked on as a bonus to whatever your purchase that you're making.
Cool.
That's pretty cool.
Any other comments or questions about HTML JavaScript integration?
Actually, where should I put the link to my to the project?
I usually send an email after the night.
Okay.
I will mention it there. Also, we could put it once this footage goes live on YouTube, so I could also put it in the description area.
Okay, awesome.
Or you could just put it in the general room of the Discord.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Until I make it more public, at least all of us could right away.
Okay, here it is.
Yeah, and that's a public page, right?
That is a public page.
Okay.
Yes.
Behind VPN. Cool. Yeah, I'm sure that will be actually a good way for people to get started on, the HTML aspect, game development. Because I hear a lot of people are still investigating different options, like different HTML game engines, like JavaScript based. But then they have to worry about all the canvas details and stuff. So this is a good mix of, like, you have a whole ecosystem of game development, but you could still take advantage of HTML part of it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking while listening to your talk, Dorian, that you can actually use this for like OAuth authentication with browsers, where you can kind of use it to pass in a token for the game to authenticate as.
Yeah, I mean, there's various ways that because essentially whatever Godot can see on that page, you can access. So this does provide the sort of, I think that Godot, through this HTML5 export, allows you to do all sorts of interactive media stuff, from games to interactive art to even, dare say, you could run a coding school with a neat sort of UI, and just have that UI, the mini games run through Godot itself.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we'll share your stuff. Well, it's already available to us, but we'll make it more public. So the second talk is going to be about making mods for your game. But there is actually maybe more to it than how to make mods for your game, because sometimes the technique that I'm going to show is needed if you want to keep your package size low. Maybe you want to go in a direction where you want to have a distributed sort of package model. And also this technique I'm going to show is also going to help you update your game too. So, but it sounds a lot sexier when you hear that, oh, okay, we are going to build a mod system for our game. But essentially, it's all the same idea. So I'm gonna show the official Godot page for it. You could find basically the summary of my talk on this page. We are going to be working with PCK files. If any one of you exported your project, you should already be familiar with PCK files. That alongside your executable, you will always have a PCK file, which is basically kind of your package file. Also, like it's everything is zipped in this file. So this page is going to show you how to create package files. I can actually quickly go over it in presentation, but that page is actually a great help. So the game that I am going to show, or basically the material that I'm going to present, the helper, is simply a first-person shooter thing. That I have a very basic weapon here attached to the camera, so the player turns around, and then when we press the mouse key, the gun fires. And in the output section, just below the game screen here, you see that the damage is recorded. So each bullet maybe creates like 10 points of damage. So the way I created this demo is that when you use the mouse's scroll up and down modes, so scroll up should actually bring the next weapon, and scroll down the other way around. Right now, even though I'm actually doing scroll up and down, I have only one weapon assigned to this player. So I'm basically going through the same weapons in inventory. I'm going to load another weapon here, cylinder. In the output, you are going to see that the weapon mode has been loaded. Now, when I do the scroll up and down, I'm actually browsing my inventory, and I'm actually picking the. And the square button, as you saw, creates 10 damage, but when I switch the cylinder weapon, I do 20 points of damage. So the 20 points is actually coming from the. So now let's go in the code and let's get to the more nitty-gritty part. So the game is basically 3D structure-wise. There's just a big game object here. It's just a simple node. Interesting about it, we have the player and the canvas layer. Canvas layer is there to hold the button. This is just a helper tool for loading the mod. Now I'll talk about different maybe methods of loading your mods, and that actually becomes more of a business decision or your design choice than a technical problem. Because I think there's really a lot more to this mod business than just the technical part. So the game script is basically taking care of the inputs. Basically, it's like the fire thing, call the next weapon, call the previous weapon. We'll go into the detail of this. The player is a very basic special node with a script to it, which is basically detecting the mouse movement and passing all this rotation information into the camera. And camera is just rotating around. And attached to the camera, we have our weapon. It's more like a placeholder. I'll actually explain why there are two weapon kind of instances here. It's here. This generic weapon node is here because when we want to swap the weapon the camera or the player is holding, we are going to get rid of this node and we are going to inject a new instance of the next weapon we want to display on the screen. So this weapon node is the placeholder, and more specialized named node, in this case square weapon, is the real weapon itself. So this way you can actually swap this instance with another. In terms of what constitutes the mod here, this is what I came up with. Actually, this saying enemy because that's how I started, but this actually weapon. So basically, this is just a 3D model of your weapon. Wanted to keep things very simple, so this is just a square, sort of elongated square. Centered, there's nothing special about this, just a weapon. Now I created a square weapon out of weapon. So that's basically when you create a new inherited scene, I chose weapon for square weapon. So that way I can actually keep track of like some, there's some inheritance. You can still take square weapon itself has a script here. It is extending the generic weapon script. We'll look into this, but this weapon is making that 10 damage. This is what we were outputting. So let's look into this weapon script. So we have the class name weapon, and each weapon will most likely have its current ammo and max ammo. So when the weapon uses ammo, are basically clamping the values between 0 and that weapon's maximum. And maybe that weapon is empty or not. So you actually write your generic weapon logic here. And naturally, every weapon will fire. So here, there's a design choice I made. This is open to interpretation. Again, this has so much to do with the way you want to handle your mod. Here, it's as if the bullet the weapon will fire is passed from outside. This is a design choice. Now, you might make the bullet part of the weapon system that basically every weapon knows which bullet it's firing. Maybe that's a much more common design choice. But in real life, when you have the bullet calibers and so many weapons can fire the same bullet, maybe that's a different kind of design choice, that you have a generic bullet scene somewhere, or the same type of bullet can be fired by different weapons. That way you can actually maybe be more economical about your resources and pass those vaccines around. So the reason why I also wanted to keep this here is because this is kind of working in and out way concerning mods. Because mods have this idea that like you bring something from outside into the game. But in-game systems could also work with the systems that are introduced within mods. So again, this is a design choice, up to you. So this is our weapon. So this script is extended in square weapon. Now, what if the user wanted to create a different kind of weapon, which is a cylinder weapon? So let's look at the 3D model for it. This also has been extended from weapon scene. And its mesh instance, instead of looking square, it's cylinder. Size it accordingly. And in the script of this cylindrical weapon, it is still extending from weapon, but instead it's doing much more, much more damage. So everything you see here is applied, except the damage value is different. Now, this cylinder weapon part as a mod, this is what we want to add into the game. But let's say maybe this is not us doing this mod work. Maybe we want other players to create their own mods and introduce into our game. I mean, I believe we have all played games on Steam, like their workshop, and we could actually introduce. So that's the whole idea. we go to project export. We gotta first add this Windows desktop part. I believe this is not really that important. I think any one of these, just one of them is enough, because we are actually going to use this resources tab. I believe each one of these is always going to bring this resources tab. Here, by default, this setting is selected. So again, by default, you always see this options tab enabled. Most likely you will always export your project, but this panel could also be used to export your mods. So you just have to go into resources and you have to select only the selected scenes and select the mod you want to export. In this case, say this is just another user not having any of the other scenes, but just working on cylinder web. Let's pretend that we are that user and we only select this cylinder web. And all you have to do is just hit this export button, and it's going to ask you where you want to export it. And that basically is the mod. Now you can distribute that in forums, email it to your friends, that sort of thing. Unfortunately for Godot, unlike Steam, we don't have a distribution platform. So that's where whole business decision about how to use mods becomes really important, because I believe when you use Steam, people always go for the default folder. Like no one ever actually wonders about, okay, well, I hit that button in workshop, install this mod, but does anyone know where that mod is going in the file system? No one actually knows that, unless you're really digging it up. But most of the time it goes somewhere and the game knows that folder. So it actually finds the mod, enables it. So we can actually do that in Godot too. We don't have a distribution service, but we could still pretend we have it. So that's what I'm going to show. So when you work with your project, as soon as you create a project and you run it the first time, there is a folder created in your operating system. So not sure if you're able to read this long path here. So maybe if I do it this way, highlight it, is it more legible, or maybe this way? So
I mean, it's possible to read.
Yeah.
To read
So
but
yeah,
not really that easy. But
okay, I'll read it out loud. So maybe you can also follow the path in your machine too. So it's basically your main drive, C, users, your username, in case it's IM. There's going to be a hidden folder, so make sure you turn on hidden folders. So under app data, there's going to be roaming, Godot, app underscore user data, and the name of your project. This name of project is basically the project name you chose when you start a new project in the Godot launch interface. So I have other projects here. So this is basically the whole Godot project folder. So inside the project we are working on, this logs folder is created automatically sometimes if needed. So don't be surprised if it doesn't exist. Sometimes I don't see it. This folder, I had to create it myself for today's presentation. But for the sake of distributing your mods, I believe this is going to be the methods you have to use. I'm going to talk about a different method you might use, which is sort of maybe not that user-friendly. So I'll first talk about the most common sense method. So this PCK file, cylinder weapon, say I downloaded this from some game forum website, or my friend has emailed this to me. So I'm going to put this PCK file in the mods folder. So let's look at how we can use this. Now, this is the part that I said we're going to quickly look at it. So now is the time. Under normal conditions, when we fire the gun, So in the weapon node, we are accessing the first child of the weapon placeholder node, and we are triggering its fire. This is that bullet instance that I was talking about. So like this is where you can actually even make the bullets modular too, or maybe have the same bullet fired by different guns by keeping it this way. So the same placeholder, like in this case square weapon, will do its damage. Now, when you have only one weapon, scrolling up and down won't change the weapon because there's only one weapon. But when the user presses that button that I showed you, which is this load cylinder weapon, this is really where the magic happens. So I'll just separate this line. Is the font large enough, by the way? No one said anything, but I'm guessing it's large enough.
I think it's good.
Yeah, I think it's large enough.
Okay. So there's a project settings singleton, and we are just saying, okay, load a new resource pack, and this is where actually the key indicator is. So find the user folder. There's going to be a mods folder in there. Just load the cylinder weapon PCK. When you do this, what this does, it actually unpacks the PCK file. And that PCK file, the way it was exported here, it actually remembers its hierarchy here. It's structure in the whole resources. It knows that it's supposed to be under scenes and under the root. And this root is basically referenced as res, as resources, because this is kind of the path you normally see here. It's resources, scenes, and then the weapon. Now, in this example, it may seem as if I am actually loading this from my project itself, because clearly on the left side you see that this exists, but in the real life scenario, in your project, this cylinder weapon won't exist, but will still be available to you via this path because you're actually loading it as a resource. So this path will actually be true as soon as you load the PCK file. So you're kind of pretending that this is the path your project has, but that's thanks to the mod you're actually loading into your. Now, this is where the tricky part starts. Your project, in this section where it's loading modes, you have to make some decisions, because this part will be dynamic. But this part, whether you actually have scenes or mods or other things, you have to let the user know how they have to keep their project structure. If this part is hard-coded, this part will most likely come from the file name. So maybe under mods folder in your user folder, maybe instead of pressing a button and reading one hard-coded mod, maybe you'll actually parse all possible PCK files. Maybe get the file name, and that file name has to match the scene file name, and that all have to exist under scenes in the project people are actually working on. So you have to come up with some kind of structure that you have to provide to your users, so when they create mods, they follow a very strict guideline. So it is certainly doable. Now, in this case, you also see that there is no fail-safe here, that if I keep hitting this button on the screen, I will be actually loading the same mod file again and again. Again, like this part here is just an example. You may actually have more sophisticated mod loading logic, because most likely these mods will be loaded when you first launch the game. but maybe you'll keep some kind of log file somewhere that has there been new mod files in that folder. If there is, maybe load only that one, so that you don't end up maybe keeping the user wait. So different strategies. So another big decision regarding how to access the mod might be, say, when the game is running and you say like press escape key and there's some kind of user interface that actually says like quit game settings, mods. When people click mods, maybe there's going to be a separate interface. Maybe that interface is going to show the file list reading from this folder. Maybe there will be some kind of checkboxes. And when the user says, okay, take into account what I checked off and on here, maybe there will be a whole like reloading process. That is certainly another option. If you are creating such an interface, you might also let the user pick individual mod files. Say maybe it actually sits in their downloads folder or documents or in their desktop, because people don't want to find this special mods folder. Maybe because they don't want to turn on the like hidden folder settings and it's a long path. Maybe you will let them pick whatever mod they want to load. That is certainly another path. But in basic terms, creating a mod is as simple as creating scenes, writing your scripts, and selecting whatever is necessary, and following the guidelines of the game creator. So exporting your mod as a PCK file, and maybe this is how you contribute to other people's Godot projects. But if you are the owner of such a Godot project, this is basically the mechanism with which you use mods. So this could be someone else's mod. And really, this part here is how we then use the mod. Because once we load the mod, this is again a choice that I made specifically for this game. It's actually a very silly example, because I wanted to separate the whole like, okay, what do you do with the mods? That's a whole like other design decision, steps of a series of design decisions, versus how to actually just right away use them. Now, when we load the resource, under weapons, this is just an array of weapons. So imagine that's the user's weapon inventory. Right now, the game starts with just only square weapon. So we are actually appending a cylinder weapon to this list. So when the user scrolls up and down, so all we are doing is basically incrementing, well, I mean, when the button has been pressed, if we have more weapons in the inventory, then we are basically selecting the proper weapon, and we are getting rid of this instance of weapon and initiating the desired weapon. That way we are actually visually updating the weapon. That way, whatever that child is, the first child of this weapon placeholder, it will do its fire and do damage. The values will be calculated accordingly. So in a sense, this code kind of doesn't care which mod or weapon is firing. It just knows that the first child under weapon is going to have fire and do damage. So again, these considerations will be in your guidelines and rules. I mean, when you are loading your mods, you could do more checks here, whether the loaded scene, like in this case, this weapon, has missing nodes or some script attached or not, if a certain method is defined or returning a certain value, because you also have to validate if that mod is safe. people may load some like bizarre stuff that actually pulls some data into your game. We were just talking about HTML stuff. It might be a like very scary deal for you. But this is basically it. So questions and answers. Or I could actually switch screens and emphasize stuff.
Yeah, I do want to mention that you like early on you were talking about working with the how there's like no Steam Workshop with Godot. You should actually be able to load things based upon a direct file path for like using like the Workshop, for example, or Maxless mods or whatever mod loader of your choice. But I wanted to also touch on something else you kind of briefly touched on. Do you have any suggestions for how to stop people from getting like malicious scripts and stuff and put it into their game, since they're, generally players are going to just download this off, like you said, like a forum or something. So anyway, to like, for example, like OS execute, I think is like a pretty dangerous command.
Yeah,
Can
this
be run.
stuff.
Is there any things to negate that?
I think see, that's a painful part, right? Like you want to trust people, and yet you can't trust people. So when you load the modes, you could write a very like lengthy parser. Say if your mod shouldn't ever use OS execute. Once you read the code of the mod, if there's any line that actually has anything like this goes into the regular expressions area, well, skip that mod. Just simply not load it. Like that would be my answer. It's painful because you just want to trust people, but it's really hard.
I'm afraid something like that might provide a false sense of security. I don't know how someone would put in basically the equivalent of an OS execute without actually having the phrase OS execute in their code, but it seems to be something that a clever hacker probably could figure out.
Yeah. Right now, it's perfectly possible. When my cylinder weapon mod, the very first thing it does is that it actually executes something, as well as incurring the damage. Like, I think this is what Joseph was saying. Like, what is the mechanism that should stop me from using this line?
Right. And if you can search a mod's code, could a mod have code that searches your code? And like essentially, if you're not intending to open source your game, someone could install a mod on it that searches through the code and then uploads all that code to some sort of website or something that the user could then.
It's true. I wonder how I think there's like an encryption thing you can do for your PCK file. I wonder if it's like when like the game starts up, if it just unencrypts that entire thing.
It might be, but even if it's encrypted, it's still going to run within Godot context, right?
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, so, and then in that case, what Jeff was saying, let's just copy the whole. Yeah, I think, it sounds very possible to me. It's like.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you follow Tetraforce, but how the develop. I'm not really kind of working on that portion, but how the developers are currently going right now is they're building out kind of like like their own little object text file editor thing where there's a JSON like, it's not really JSON, it's JSON similar language where you can like declare an object and what sprite it has and call a few functions that have been whitelisted.
Okay.
And to make sure that it works with like over networking stuff, because Tetraforce is a multiplayer thing.
Yeah.
But it's a very hands-on approach where it's kind of there's putting another layer there completely. it's still using a PCK file, but it's only loading in, like, I think they're calling it TetraScript.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like just limiting the like in PHP world, when you set it up in a shared hosting environment, you don't let every single PHP function be available to every user. That sort of. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
let me see
in
if I can
terms of sorry. Yeah, in terms of like security, the security side of things, I think that really, um, outside of having sort of either a scripting, a very sort of, um, you know, restricted scripting mechanism, like you mentioned, Joseph, or if you, and I know that this is not available for Godot, but I know that there's some work with WASM to basically provide a runtime that would basically enforce what kind of permissions a bit of code can and can't have. So, for instance, you could basically say that this bit of code will only require a network connection to this particular server, rather than also allowing for OS execute. Now, I don't think you can do that sort of same thing on Godot, because it's a little bit more complicated. I think that probably the most realistic option for most of us, because I doubt it that we're going to end up building some. I mean, maybe we'll be lucky. We'll build the next Minecraft, and there'll be tons of mods for our stuff. But I think that there will be so few mods that you could probably just vet any mod that somebody wants to share through an official site that you would maintain.
Yeah. I was just looking at if there was anything under OS but permissions, and not that many. It's request permission and request permissions, and it says this is implemented on Android. Sounds like it's only available for Android.
Yeah, it's the intent permissions that every Android app has to declare.
That's like this program wants access to your address book, or this program
Yeah,
wants access
yeah,
to
your camera,
or...
yeah, all that stuff. But in
Like,
terms
hello,
of
I'm a very gentle Tetris clone, and
yeah,
I want to address to your phone book and to your call history. Never, don't mind me.
yeah, yeah, I think this is a question worth asking developers of Godot. What is the mechanism that would stop anyone writing a mode access to the core project code? Because it sounds very possible that as a mode writer, you may have access to the entire project.
Yeah, not being stopping people from dumping their code's probably the biggest problem though, because
Yeah,
a lot of forum stuff. I mean, they have you running like installers and stuff to get mods running. So at that point, you pretty much compromise your system if there's any malicious software in there, anyhow.
yeah.
But for something like Steam Workshop, it would be good to have some sort of roles set in there.
But I think the same question applies to Steam cases too. I've never written a mod for any Steam game, but I think it's the same question. Like, what is in?
Well, you would use the same method. Like if you made a Godot game, put it on Steam, and you were loading from the workshop, you'd use the same method where all the mod
But say,
files would probably be.
Imagine it's not a Godot game; it's a Unity game, and you use C#. You're writing a mod, and your mod, like the model that I showed you, the whole point of writing a mod is that method that you are going to write should be the same method the game is using, but your mod will actually introduce new values in. So, but if the first line you're writing is anything like OS execute in our case here, well, I'm just doing that in C# with C# in a Unity game. Well, it's on Steam. It's a different platform, different conditions, but it's the same question and problem.
Yeah.
So how do they deal with it?
Actually, I will see if I can reach out to somebody on my team at work and say if they have a how they've done it before, because I believe like Galciv 3 has Team Workshop support. And we use a custom engine, so I'm curious if how that's done.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Like if there is some you know, above any programming language sort of like business logic here.
Yeah, I know. I know for a upcoming project that we're doing, there's Lua support. So most of the core game mechanics are written in C++, and then there's a Lua interface to kind of
Like
automate that.
Yeah,
But
API.
yeah. So and I believe that Lua is kind of sandbox.
Yeah, because in Lua you can only use some functions, and those functions, not like one of them will do anything scary. So you are kind of limiting the user to only use those functions, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's the idea of it. So that project is probably not going to use it for modding at all. But like I'll have to figure out what they did for Galciv 3.
Yeah, I think that might be really helpful. I don't know whether it is possible or how easy it might be to. I mean, I know within the engine they should do this like stack call. I mean, call stack. Like say when one function calls the other, and so the engine knows which functions are called. That's why you have this stack here. Is this available to your code that within the game, like game code itself here? Will you actually know which methods the mod is firing? In that case, like the model you presented, if the mod is trying to run any function other than the ones that you ask the mod writer to use, then you just say no, this mod is doing something other than the specifications. I'm not sure how to read this kind of stack frames in a normal execution. So that might be another choice.
I think that if you're going to go down that road, you might as well just have your own sandbox script.
You're right.
Because the more you think about it, it's just, well, don't provide any functions that somebody can manipulate.
Actually, that's a good point. Maybe I believe there's a way to like execute Godot functions without actually calling running it in the same instance of same process. I'm not sure if I know you can do that externally. So you could do like an OS execute to call your game executable, and to pass in a GD file to that, and you could execute scripts that way, and it won't interact with your game code at all, and then you can take like some sort of output. But that gets really messy, and that's a lot of work.
It is. And at the end of today, yeah, you just want to say, damn man, we just wanted to write games, not deal with some security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess a more fun question would be: are you using this in your next project at all?
I think I will be using it because my next project is going to be. I can actually show you a screenshot. An outdoor gardening simulator. So, as you are seeing it right, the gardens.
Yeah.
Is that from the game?
Yeah, this is just well, I haven't put this in Godot yet, but this is from Blender. It's going to be like this, yes.
Nice.
Oh, there you go in 3D stuff. Are you planning on using the master branch for Godot 4 early release, or are you going to be doing?
I think
3.2?
By the time I get to do the models and I have to take care of like there's a lot of game design choices I have to make. This game will have a day and night cycle, but also time of the year cycle too. Also geographical accuracy will be important. So you could play this game in different cities. So depending on which city you pick in the game, maybe you'll have a colder climate, and your selection of plants will have. Or you may insist to plant one type which won't grow successfully in the climate. So I have to basically come up with a lot of game design choices that by the time I actually fully flesh it out, I think Godot 4 will come out. So I'm not gonna even like bother with like discovering for Godot 4 yet, because I think it's just gonna be out. I'd rather learn it from scratch when it's because a lot of people say like if you do stuff now when it's official release, you might. Or did what I say? Did what I said make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
kinda.
sense. I'm still working on my current, but I've point not to really do any other, start on any other possible projects at the moment because I'm gonna wait for Godot 4 before I make anything new.
Yeah. So the mod idea for my game, naturally there will be a lot of plants. So if I could make it modular, I can actually commission someone, and they will just go in the engine, and just like this new weapon, they will just will say name of the new plant, model of the plant, and do a few more things here, maybe some kind of like animation player. That will be the mod. So at the very least, I will actually collect other 3D artists or game designers' work, so I don't end up actually doing all. Of course, if I can do that, that also opens up the possibility that, well, if when the game is out, you can also actually. That's why I have to really think about this part here, like this interface business, whether it's automatically loaded from a folder or there's some kind of user interface. Like these are more business decisions than technicality, because it's really just one simple line, but the implication is really big.
I don't think you really need to use. I mean, you can use the mod system, contracting artists and stuff, but yeah, I think the mod system is only really needed when you want to open it up to people that you don't want to, like, you don't want to have to manually add in everything that they do.
Yeah.
Like when you're contracting artists, you can just have them send you the scene files, and then you can add them to the project, and you're good to go. Like you'll have the full project, and you could give the artist
contractors. There's
Okay.
yeah, if they're contractors, you can just add them to your Git repo, and they're legally liable for whatever damages they do.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also want to take advantage
At least in the
of.
United States.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit different here. I don't know. Depends on the contract you're signing. You can always oblige them.
Yeah.
So just a question about
Yeah.
because you have project settings and you're loading the resource pack, and then you're loading the scene. Is it possible to actually load all of the scene elements from a pack, or is that just like it looks like you have to keep your naming convention very, very similar for things to actually work if you want to distribute things as packs?
Yeah, say if another person picked a different PCK name, this could be arbitrary. My next weapon. But then if their scene structure is the same as this one, yeah, the newly loaded one will override the other one. That's practically overriding your PSCN file here.
I believe you can add a parameter to disallow overrides though.
This one. So when you say false, then you no longer replace the files. Yeah, Joseph is right.
So, but you don't when you load in a PCK file, you don't know what files it's adding into your game. you'll have to, that'll be kind of part of your design structure. So you'd have like, maybe you'd have a text file saying all these resources are in this mod, load it all in, or you can kind of have a directory that, dynamically looks through. It's your design at that point.
Yeah.
So would you have to basically predefine, like if you had multiple, if you're loading multiple resource packs, you probably want to have everything in its own compartmentalized path with all its dependencies so that you don't have things overriding each other, right? Essentially.
Correct. I think so. I think in this case, whatever scene I'll be accepting from outside, from a mod, should never be in the scenes because this is my own folder structure. This should probably be mod. So in this case, it doesn't exist. It gives error, but that way, yeah, if the user's badly chosen name or unfortunately chosen name exists as my one of the scenes here, files in the scenes folder, yeah, they won't. Mind you, see so many arbitrary things here. This path kind of, but no, I was actually saying this during my. This is the part I can actually hard code. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. There is actually nothing stopping now from crashing it. Just look at it this way. As soon as you run this line, this path becomes available to you. So that means that if in this pack, if they created this, which actually is an existing scene, you're screwed. So, because this part, I mean, literally, this game would run if I actually like commented out this line, and it would still try to load it, and it may even override one of the existing. What happens? So at runtime, you're overriding one of your scenes because you just loaded the mod file. Like, this is the stuff that I'm actually discovering. Like, I know how to technically use this, but then I don't have all the answers to this security business, this sort of the protective state of affairs here.
So it almost seems like you have to vet every
exactly
piece of key that you pack that you take.
Yeah.
You have to vet it, or you just have to accept the risk.
Yeah. There's actually
I mean, at the end of the day, the more you restrict the modders, the more difficult it is for them to make a cool mod.
So you are saying restrict them more?
I'm saying it's a balance between restricting them and then giving them freedom.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if they want to make a cool mod that like turns your desktop into the game space, they'll need access to OS execute.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's a lot of risk in that.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if anyone is writing a mod. My game actually might use Steam achievements. And if anyone is writing their mod, that it will actually introduce a new Steam achievement. And that means they will now have to integrate with other systems of my game code that will actually because that's how Steam works. You have to make an API call to Steamworks to register new achievements. Then at a different time in your game, you have to say, okay, that achievement has been achieved, and you just say like, it's now taken care of. So now the user's mod will also have to talk through your app with like to Steam. So yeah, like you said, there has to be a very good balance between restriction and freedom there.
That said, I mean, this is actually kind of a cool mechanism if you ever decide to provide DLC of any sort.
Exactly.
Right? Whether it's like, oh yeah, here's a free trial of my mobile app, and you want to get the extra levels. Well, then yeah, exactly.
No, it is actually meant for DLCs. Yeah, you're right. This page actually talks all about this too, like this part here. official Godot page. So it's like bug fixes,
patches.
mods. Yeah.
Patches is an interesting way. So it's so I would generally think that you just want to introduce patches into your base game code, but maybe from a download perspective, that might not be doable. Where it requires a rewrite of the entire PCK file when downloading.
Yeah, when it's the
know.
same PCK file, if it's the same name, it basically overwrites the original one. That way you patch your game.
Yeah.
And I've actually already used this without writing any extra code. Like my itch .io like game, like the game executable files I had on itch. I didn't touch the exe file. I only update the PCK file. That way, if anyone had like the exe, they were just downloading the PCK file, which actually had the updated assets and some bug fix. So like, there's already some kind of. Go ahead.
Well, what I think would is kind of a cool idea is when I saw patches, what I was thinking was that, like, let's say you have you built a game that's like 500 gigabytes, and you have a 500 gigabyte PCK file.
Yeah.
Maybe if you tried updating that, it requires them to download an entire new 500 gigs. But maybe instead you can create a patch file that's 2 megabytes that they download instead.
Absolutely true.
And they.
Hello?
Or just have one project that has like 2,000 PCK files rather than your 5 gig download.
Yeah, both are valid. You can either go with multiple small size PCK files, but what Joseph was saying is actually something they mentioned on this page, that the updates are always introduced as small PCK file. That is actually like both models are valid. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe this is this kind of modular method is like what World of Warcraft uses. Because like if you go into like your data file in World of Warcraft, there's a bunch of MPQ files, and they're kind of loaded in the same fashion. And if you extract one and make changes to one, it'll load in a certain order. And when they release patches, they just add a new MPQ file.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, this is it. It's just have a lot of decisions to make regarding the security and the flavor of it. But other than that, it seems to be very simple enough. Yeah, mobile is a whole different game. Don't know so much like how that whole you buy stuff and where is it even stored? You purchase stuff because like there has to be some kind of external service where your account information is kept and your assets is kept. So when you uninstall the game and re-download it, well, are the assets part of like Google Store, or are they actually physically somewhere else?
Yeah, like I can
notice that in. Sorry, go on.
I'm just gonna look this up. Google Play Store features.
Because I know I've had situations where I've bought add-ons through microtransactions in a game, and then I uninstall the game, and then the game just basically says, "Oh, you don't have it, so buy it again."
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
It's a decision like any other, right?
Yeah. If only they kept it in local storage. Yeah. Man, that local storage is such a quick time saver thing, but yeah, when you do some stuff at work and it stores it in the machine there, because I didn't used to use a laptop, so I had a desktop machine at work. So when I got home, it was such a bummer. Like, okay, so all that cool stuff is now at work in local storage.
Okay, so looking at it, what Google provides to is they provide a they provide like an API publishing thing where you can configure different API endpoints. They have a save game store, leaderboards, and achievement systems, and a like it looks like a match lister, not a maker, just a lister. And then they have a separate billing system from that. So you'd have to write something to tie the two things together.
Yeah,
Okay.
complementary. So
Yeah, it was never something I ever had to actually deal with when doing Android development in the past. Plus, yeah, the mobile ecosystem, has changed so much in terms of APIs and stores and things like that. I feel that the knowledge that I had from years ago, it's probably practically meaningless now. So I was curious if anybody had dealt
well,
with that
you
recently.
know, none of this will matter soon because it will all be VR. So that is something I'm still not so sure about, this whole VR business.
I don't. I feel like it's a market, but I don't think it's necessarily a big market. I think it'll always exist in some sense,
You
but I don't
know,
think it's gonna be like gaming 2.0. You know.
so I
I
actually
think
go ahead.
I think VR on phones is pretty cool because I've got a phone that costs me $10. It's basically just a piece of plastic with lenses on it that you can strap to your head, and then you stick your phone in it, and it uses your phone screen, your phone's motion sensors and stuff.
Yeah.
And so now you get a full VR headset, full VR setup for a pocket change basically.
But how
So
do you deal with the motion sickness?
well, I mean, I don't really get motion sickness too much for VR. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the VR apps have been fairly limited for phones. Often the character doesn't move around too much, but it just, I think that is kind of the most practical way of doing VR because these big, huge $1,000 like Oculus and HTC Vive or Vive or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
I don't see those catching on in any major way. It's got to be cheap.
Well, yeah, like I said, like there are like right now, if you made a VR game, you could pull a pretty decent profit. The only big problem is that the market is so small.
Yeah.
So like there's enough market, but there's just it's a growing market too. It's not it's growing.
The market is actually
well, but
someone was saying this, like for a technology to establish itself very strongly in market, and basically people love it and then embrace it. It's basically the porn industry. Once they actually discover and reliably use it, that's when you'll actually have a real VR industry, gaming market.
yeah.
So, and I'm saying this because I used to work for a adult dating company, and
okay.
trust me, it was actually like it was a weird place. Like they never really wanted to do anything with VR, but they were still seeing it as like the next big thing. Like, first you had magazines and like DVDs, videos, internet came along. Like for each technology to be more widely used, porn has always played a big role because people wanted to access it, and the quicker, the faster, the cheaper you gave it to them. That's how sort of like I can't remember who, but there's even maybe a book about this, or maybe how the adult dating industry basically playing a role in technology, the spread of technology based. But I'm digressing.
Oh,
Yeah, I think one of the big problems with VR.
I definitely think that's true.
Yeah, you believe so?
Oh, I definitely think that's true. Like if you go on the VR chat at all, or I mean, you can see like a hint of that.
Yeah. but it has to be seamless. Like say, you shouldn't have any motion sickness. Like you feel like you're really immersed. People actually do that. Like people already
Yeah, I
kind of
think
like
that's a bit away
yeah.
off.
Yeah, I think that comes out. That's basically you hit the nail on the head in terms of making it immersive, right? But unfortunately, like VR right now as it stands is just an entertainment thing. Like there's very few things where you could say, okay, this is a productivity tool.
Yeah.
It's got one use. But the problem is that all of the very interesting virtual reality stuff, like the technology, the limitation of the technology, basically they flow into your game world, right? You can't go very far because you're still connected to wires or um, like you can't experience the world, right? It's very good. Like if you were building a racing sim or a fighter plane sim, then yes, VR is there.
Yeah.
But the minute you say like I'm an it's an FPS, I want to now
Walk
go
around.
prone and walk around.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, I have seen
think
something
the
like that.
dream.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I have seen something like that where it wasn't a, I think it was called like the Zone or the Void or something, I forget, but one of those kind of VR arcade things where they have a wireless VR setup, and then they have a room set up that has its walls and stuff mimicking where the walls inside the game world are. So you actually can move around within it. But again, that's not something that you could set up at home. That's something that needed this special facility. I think there is one in Toronto down near the CN Tower. But
I think VR is successful as a market as Tesla is successful as a market. As in, it's not for everyone. It's for a very slim amount of people. But those people are big spenders.
Yeah.
So if you can get the
what I'm thinking of is back in the early days of PC gaming, like back in the early 90s, everyone had a joystick because that was just kind of understood. If you're going to play games, you're going to have a joystick. And because of that, flight sims were one of the bigger genres. There were some coming out all the time from different companies. Some would be plane sims, some would be spaceship sims, whatever. But it was just understood that there was enough of a market there for there to be quite a few games in that genre. But then they started coming out with games that only needed a mouse and keyboard, like first-person shooters and stuff, and people stopped buying joysticks. And then now flight sims are just a tiny little niche because it needs that extra bit of hardware that most people don't have. And I think that's going to be the biggest problem with VR, is that it requires this expensive piece of hardware that only really has this one purpose.
Well, if I were a serious investor, I mean, I was already approached sometime in August by a company that wanted to do some kind of like headset that would actually read your brain waves, and you would literally play the game with your brain wave. And this is serious research. Like I've come across different companies. Like instead of spending my money as an investor on VR machines or headsets, whatever, where you are still tied to device, like you said, there's motion sickness. This technology that I'm mentioning is some kind of like crown that you put on your head. It's reading some waves and broadcasting it to machine, which could be your PC, and the game is running. So you are not connected to anything, and it's very seamless. It just sits on your head. Like I'd rather actually spend my money on that. There's great deal of opportunity, and they're actually doing this mainly for disabled people, so they can actually do proper computer human interaction.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a lot more accessible in current VR.
Yeah. So because like why put something around your eyes and restrict your eyesight? Because I mean we see all those videos on YouTube, right? people try to play VR games and they look so stupid. They try to run around in their living room and then just crash their TV. It's like,
I
yeah,
mean,
because like you just took away the whole agency of like, I just want to really walk, because that's how I feel when I play.
have you ever used a VR headset? Like, uh, they're 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 pretty fun if you don't get super motion sick.
Yeah, I've got I've got the phone one that I got the phone one that I talked about, and I've got PSVR, though I haven't used that too much. But yeah, I've played like Ace Combat 7 with it a bit, and that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a chance of
it's
trying out the HTC Vive, and it was pretty good. And one of the early versions of the Oculus Rift, one of my CS profs had a house party, and somebody brought in like one of the very first developer versions of the Oculus Rift. I think that was the only time I've ever gotten motion sick, and I made the very, very poor choice of, you know, the old Villa demo that they had where you'd walk around the house. I had been playing a lot of FPS games during university, and so I just took off when, as my character took off, right, running, sprinting through the house, and that did not feel good at all. Once I slowed down, it was okay, but it's like, this is not. Don't try to play Unreal Tournament in this, because that will just make you feel really, really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to either be able to like work through the motion sickness, or you have to use like the teleportation control system, which is unfortunate, but yeah, it's like I heard like a lot for like the people who've been able to play Half-Life Alyx, that it's a lot more immersive to use like the joystick controls for moving around, but like people who do that end up getting a lot more motion sickness.
I played the Doom VFR on the PSVR, and it by default has the teleporting, but you can set it up to use regular controls, and I found regular controls are fine. The game itself wasn't very good, but from a control standpoint and from a motion sickness standpoint, I didn't have a problem with it.
It depends a lot on the person and like your biology and stuff.
I wonder if it's also because I was playing with a very early version of the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, that definitely contributed to your case.
Yeah. No, I mean, like,
I think everyone felt motion sickness with that. I don't think there was any way not to.
Yeah, the minute I just started walking like a regular human being, then it was fine within that context. But it was interesting. It was the first time I actually felt, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get motion sickness, but I was playing, I think, Robo Recall on the Oculus Rift one time at a friend's.
That's that shooting gallery type thing, right?
Yeah, it's like a shooting gallery, but like, I don't know. It's like you get guns, you shoot at robots, and then you can grab them, tear them apart, throw them at things, and then there's like a boss battle at the end. And I had a lot of fun playing that game. But like near the end of it, I ended up punching the ceiling of the room I was in, and it hurt.
Wow.
I think there's a lot more opportunity to VR than the general gaming community gives it credit for. But it's also not going to be the next big thing that's going to kill console gaming or anything. It's definitely going to be a niche that's going to be around there for a while until the brain chips come. And then when the brain chips come, maybe things will start to change.
Yeah, I believe so.
I find it is one of the more promising methods. I guess, I mean, phone gaming is already pretty big, but I've never really been a fan of it, just because the controls are so limited, with on-screen buttons and stuff like that. But with a VR headset, both your hands are free now, so you can just use like a Bluetooth gamepad or something.
Yeah, I think that definitely might be a more of a thing too. Is smartphones get more and more powerful. Because like I have one of the Google Cardboard things, and I have a pretty decent phone. But like you can definitely tell the quality difference between that and like an Oculus.
Yeah.
The phone is like at least as good as an Oculus is right now. There's no question people are going to be jumping onto like mobile gaming for VR.
Yeah, that's
So,
another
I didn't
market.
hear. I didn't really hear what you had said there. You said there's no question for mobile gaming for VR, but you cut out a little bit before that.
Oh man, I just said that once the some mobile phones are more powerful and you can start rendering like a full 3D world without putting on really high fog and low polygons. And at that point, I think people are going to be a lot more comfortable using devices for their
I think he's pretty much cut
Yeah.
off exactly where he was saying the same thing. So I think I understood what he said.
VR.
Right.
He's saying that there's certainly a difference or discrepancy in terms of quality between VR headsets and mobile phones, but once mobile phones are able to display better quality, there will be some kind of merge mobile phones and VR, like maybe like the cardboard thing, maybe if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the phone VR that I've been talking about is essentially cardboard. Like the headset I use is not.
Yeah, so I
It
guess
uses the same systems.
yeah, I
You
guess this was his
tell the
point.
phone that you're using Google Cardboard, but use a different thing that actually has straps and padding and stuff, so it's more comfortable to wear.
Yeah, that's I have a plastic one as well. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely don't think the cardboard ones are garbage. Don't
And another limitation with
cardboard compatible plastic.
right. And another limitation with those phone VR systems, the plastic phone VR that we've been talking about, is that, as I've been saying, it can use phone sensors to track the orientation of your head, but there's really no way to track movement. Like you can't walk around the room and have the VR track you like that. It's really only good for stuff that you'd play sitting down in one location. So that's one limitation. And one thing that I think would be interesting that I don't know if anyone's working on is to use the phone's camera for hand tracking. Like have some gloves with symbols on them that the phone can track, and they could just be like cloth gloves with these symbols printed on them, and use the camera to see where those symbols are and use that to determine where your hands are and what position you're holding them in.
Yeah, actually, you could probably use that for tracking head movements.
That technology
yeah,
kind of exists, actually.
So
yeah, I think the problem with using the phone camera is just that it's only got one viewpoint, and things can get obscured.
Well, not the new one. It's the new one.
Yeah.
Don't the new camera,
Well,
new phones have like
or things
a whole bunch of cameras on them?
go out of focus. No, I'm just saying the direction. Like the direction. If you put the face hands down beside the camera, would be have enough viewing angle to see your hands by your side, which is why I think the HTC Vive comes with external cameras.
Okay, yeah, you cut out a little bit there, but I think I get what you're. The camera would only be able to track your hands when they're in front of your face, essentially. But
Yeah,
I think that's really all you would need, because if you can't see your hands, and most of the time you're not going to care if the system doesn't know exactly where they are.
But what if I wanted to hip holster my gun in my VR game?
Or scratch your ass. Right?
Yes, that's too.
Yeah,
That's
he's gonna make that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would be some limitations on that. Maybe there could be like simple like Wii style motion sensors on the hand devices, and that would also probably be reasonably cheap. If it only detects acceleration, doesn't have a big elaborate setup for position stuff, and that could track your hands when they're away from your field of view, and then use the cameras when they're within the field of view to get a more precise location.
Yeah. You also do just a gyro plus camera plus machine learning.
Yeah, well, actually, Microsoft had Kinect, right? That's actually no longer out there. That was actually,
That's true.
yeah, that technology of like following your hand or body gestures is out there. Just somebody has to combine it with the VR logic. Just it's going to be a complex system or a complementary system. It's possible.
Well, that's sort of how the PSVR works, because it uses those Move controllers that have
Yeah,
big glowing balls at the ends, and it uses the PlayStation camera to track that, and that's also how it tracks the headset.
yeah,
Is I have I have the PSVR, and it only works if you have the PS camera
yeah.
set up to see it.
Yeah. For the hand gesture, actually, to be more precise, I'm not sure if it's still going on, but there was this technology, Leap Motion. I still have their device. I haven't done much with it, but it detects your finger movements, and it's not just hand gesture. Like it actually detects individual fingers, and you can actually assign. I mean, just like in Godot, when you say, this key combination has this kind of like a action in the game. You could create different finger movement combinations to mean something. It isn't just like I mean, the very simple thing is the pinch. When you use two like your thumb and the index, and then you just basically smear on the screen, going opposite each other. Well, that's the like I'm zooming in kind of action. So you could create combinations like this, and it's very precise actually.
Or you could just go on eBay and buy a bunch of power gloves.
Yeah. So, but yeah, basically these technologies exist separately. Someone has to put them all together. That maybe like you said, maybe some like glove and then mixed with some kind of visual feedback system.
Unfortunately, I
Yeah,
have
Jack,
to
you can,
head out now. But it's good seeing everybody again, and thank you for letting me present about the HTML
Yeah.
JS integration stuff.
Thank you. That was really helpful for me. Like I will think of different possibilities of using. Thank you for doing it.
You're
yeah, it was
welcome.
great hearing about that. Thanks, Dorian.
Yeah, I think Kumsal about the showing off the sort of the demo of
The mod.
the exported resource packs and how to load them. That
Yeah.
was pretty cool.
You're welcome. I hope we can have more of these talks, like just fill in the gaps. Cool. Thank you. So have a good night. Yeah, I think we'll be hanging out a bit longer.
Night,
yeah, you too, man.
Yep. Good night.
So who else is hanging out?
Yeah.
I can still be here another 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll stay for a little bit.
Because it's going to
Okay.
be bedtime soon in the house. So I'll
Okay.
probably stay
Well,
awake, but yeah, go ahead.
I might as well sign off now. I don't
Yeah.
really have anything more to bring up. So yeah, it was good talking to all of you.
Sure.
Have a good night, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Jeff. So it's you and me.
And then there was two.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like I have like maybe 5-10 more minutes, but I actually wanted to ask you, was it like maybe a month ago? I was watching your interview with PigDev. Yeah. So that was an interesting one, really. Showing your CI work, because it's an interesting thing. I think like tonight, what Dorian did too. It's like, well, we covered HTML stuff, like you are doing the CI stuff. I'm showing like mod stuff. Like it's not essentially developing a game. It's not really writing game code, but there's so much sort of peripheral stuff maybe it's kind of
Yeah.
necessary.
My expertise is doing game stuff that's not actually a direct part of game development. So I do a lot of code, I do a lot of API development, I do a lot of CI/CD stuff, I do a lot of infrastructure work, all for games.
Yeah,
But
it's supportive systems.
yeah, and it's a different aspect, and it's pretty fun.
I agree, because I mean,
and
I think it's equally important. All for it, because when people, so many players don't know what goes into, especially in AAA companies. Like there's so much, like with the art pipeline, people working on tools so that the tools can actually help other people develop content, all that stuff. Well, it's not exactly writing the game, but it's writing supportive and supplementary like systems so that you could actually have an easier time creating. Like it's all part of the same effort, but it's often overlooked or not easily perceived.
Yeah.
Like hopefully anyone who is watching
designers get all the credit.
yeah, exactly, because that they kind of are under the spotlight, right?
Yeah, not that what they do isn't important. What they do is, I mean, very very important and pretty cool, and a lot of work I could do. But their misconception. The misconception is they're just idea guys, but they're pretty hard workers.
Yeah. Well, hopefully anyone who watches our recording may think that, well, maybe they are really into games, but they find the, like you said, doing the CI/CD stuff, like you are still doing something about game, but you're not doing the game. So people with that mindset might still find a way to get into the industry, or either as a hobby or as a professional.
Yeah. I mean, like, where I work, we have people in all kinds of different roles. I mean, even if we got I do like cloud work. We have network developer. We got a sysadmin, and then we got designers who do like production. So we got production people who are doing things that aren't really, they're not coding, they're not doing art, they're not working on technical stuff, but they're doing things that are just as important, if not more important.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, in a sense, it's like shooting a movie. It's like behind the cameras. There's like, I mean, once I understood the whole production aspect of movie making, uh, it was a revelation, because for a simple scene, I mean, during the day, these guys plan out so many scenes to be shot. But at some point, you know what? These actors or the film crew, anyone on the set, well, they will get hungry. So around lunchtime, there had better be food. So someone actually has to take care of the food. It has to arrive on time so people can eat, continue their work. Like just that aspect of it, that someone actually has to take care of that. And when you watch a movie, you don't actually see that layer. But that actually goes so much into the production, because, well, if the crew is unhappy, everybody's grumpy. And why? Because people are hungry. Well, you are going to forget your lines, or the cameraman will actually not focus the camera. Like people will get sloppy or angry. Like you were pointing out, like if not more important, yeah, it is sometimes more. It's an invisible layer, but it must be there so that the job that people will see in a public forum can happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of titles that if they didn't have a producer wouldn't have ever shipped, and there's probably others that haven't shipped and they would have if they had an extra producer.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really important. So, well, I have to wrap up here.
Yeah.
So
It's great talking with you and everyone. Thanks for for presenting. It's cool to have.
Yeah, thank you.